Brian, welcome to the USA. How are you doing over in Scotland?
Absolutely fine, John. All the better for talking to you, buddy.
Yeah, I can't believe that it's 6 months. It's almost 7 months now, 6 months that I was in Scotland in June of 2016. And you, myself, and Rich Ritchie, we had a 4-hour lunch talking about the paranormal.
We certainly did, and I enjoyed every minute of it, buddy.
Yeah, I tell you, that was, for me, that was actually the highlight of that trip because I got to really talk to you guys and learn a lot. So for our audience, Brian, tell them how you got started in this field.
Oh, well, how did I get started?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, put it this way, I'm nearly 73 years of age now, and I've been involved in this one way or another since I guess I was about 3 years old. So I think you could say I've been involved in this for literally all of my life. I had my first encounter with something when I was around 2 years old, and I can still remember it as sharply as today as when it happened all those years ago. And this has happened all through my life. I've encountered the other side, if you could just put, yeah, let's just call it the other side. I've encountered that. It's held my interest, and I've fulfilled it in many ways. I started off, I guess, maybe 40 odd years ago investigating ufology. And when I got started into ufology, I realized it was interlinked with the paranormal. And the paranormal became my main focus. And ever since then, well, I've written, I guess 12, 13 books. I currently edit Phenomena magazine. I used to edit a newsstand magazine called Paranormal. But I've been editing Phenomena for the past nearly 5 years. And we're now getting downloads around 2 million a month worldwide. So I guess, I've been pretty grounded in the subject for most of my life.
Well, that's great. So Phenomenon magazine gets 2 million views a month for that magazine?
Yes, it does, sir. Yes, it does. Well, we're going obviously into the USA, we're in the UK, we're in Europe, we're in Australia, we're in India, we're in Japan, we're also, believe it or not, in Russia. And Europe, obviously. We're getting 2 million downloads a month around.
And that's a free magazine, right? That magazine?
It's a free magazine, yeah. And point of fact, pardon me, we joined forces with Tim Beckley and Tim Schwartz over at Conspiracy Journal, and we combined our mailing list with theirs, and I have no idea what the circulation will be now.
Yeah.
But before we did that, it was 2 million, so it can only have gone up since then.
Okay. Well, I think you have one more article of mine for the February issue, right? Because you said you had me in there for 6 months through February. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to write you something else, and maybe we can get Fred over here to write you an article since we got an even bigger circulation now. Now, the other thing we've done, and you've done the same thing with Steve Mira and yourself, and we've uploaded these shows to Zohar Stargate so that people, so people can watch it. How many lectures do you have on that website?
Well, I guess there's around 8. Around 8? Yeah, around 8 lectures on the website. On it somewhere. Pardon me.
Okay, and Gary Hesseltine, who's going to be speaking at our Philadelphia conference in Halloween weekend, he's got some lectures up there. So we've put 20 lectures up from our Philadelphia conference, and we've put 40, I think it's 47 or 49 episodes from this TV show up. So it's good, it's all free, and it's getting the information out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything that helps to spread the good word, yeah, I'll always try and support that, John.
Yeah, and when I had lunch with you, you mentioned the word synchronicity, and
yeah.
And I wrote that down, if you remember. And this was all synchronicity. I was trying to finish my book on my hauntings and why I believe the alien abduction could be, well, it's definitely interdimensional parts of it, but I believe that it was demonic. But there were so many things that happened, like, you know, I was writing for the magazine with you, you're the editor, and that's how I discovered you were uploading these videos, and now we do that. And, you know, that for us could be as big a source of income as, let's say, our conferences are.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it can be pretty handy. Steve and I, Steve Meader, that is, and I, we're currently rewriting a set of training manuals for people that want to take up paranormal investigation, UFO investigation. And I'm currently rewriting the stuff that Steve had actually written some years ago. I think he wrote them about 25 years ago originally.
Yeah. So
I'm updating them all, and I'm having to change quite a bit to reflect the fact that we've moved on a bit since those days, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it's kind of interesting how that all came together, you know. Yeah. So let's get into. Tell us the title of some of your books.
Oh, well, it started off with The View from the Abyss. We went into The Believers. Went on to Rosslyn, Between Two Worlds. Oh my goodness, let me think now. The latest one is oh, what the heck is the latest one called? When I've written so many, I tend to forget them. But like I say, I've done. Oh my goodness. Revenants, Haunted Places, Haunted People. I'm just trying to think. There was one I did. Strange Skies, Strange Eyes. There's quite a few more, but I can't quite bring them all to mind just now.
Okay, well, let's talk about The View from the Abyss. That's the book you gave. We exchanged books when we were in Scotland, and you gave
we did.
Yeah, you gave me 3 of yours. I found this one for me because I wasn't, you know, I was versed on UFO history, but not versed in the paranormal. Although I had been like you, I had my first paranormal experience. I was 4 years old. So it's always been there, but I never really researched it. So when I read this book, this brought a lot of information to light. So let's start talking about this book, and tell me about this term called Goetheia. Tell me what that means and how you figured it out and what you found out about it. Because for me, that was one of the most important things I discovered in this book.
Oh, okay. Well, the Goetia, it's a style of magic, because I have to say that, and I guess a lot of the people that listen to this might not agree with me, that I think magic is a very real thing. I believe that it stopped working because we stopped believing that it would. But the Goetia was one of the many forms of magic that have been developed. For example, one of the most recent versions of magic around is called chaos magic, but they all developed from the Goetia. Now the Goetia, it means that screaming, virtually, because people who practice Goshen magic scream their incantations at the very top of their voice. It's just the way they do it. I mean, I guess it would work whether they did or whether they didn't, but they tend to scream it. And there's a saying that you don't find the Goetia finds you. And that is very accurate, because there's also a saying that seems to go hand in hand with that. And that is, battle not with monsters lest you become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. And I can assure you that it does, because in the course of some of the things I've done over the years, I guess I've had to look into the abyss a little bit. And I know that the abyss looked back, because every time I've done it, I've had unfortunate things, I guess, happen in the house, happen to me. And I've had to cleanse my house 3 different times to get these things out of it, because these things can and do latch onto you. There's no 2 ways about it.
Yeah, you know, I agree with that 100%, Brian. You know, when you start looking into this, you know, it gets their attention. Now they notice you. You know, it almost seems like all around us are fallen angels and guardian angels, you know. And when you start to look into this forbidden knowledge, they all of a sudden turn and notice you, and now you become a target of theirs.
Well, yes, they do, but there are things you can do to, if you like, guard yourself, to take protection against them. But the main thing to realise is that you have the upper hand here. This is your reality, it's not their reality. And you can banish them back to where they came from, and that's happened on 3 separate occasions, I guess about 2 or 3 years apart. And I've actually stood in the house, in my own house, when my wife was out at work or out doing something else. And I've stood in the house and I've called these things to the very lowest, and I've told them to get out of my house, to leave me alone, not to bother me, they don't belong here, and get out now. And I swear now, John, that when these things leave, it's like a light switch going off. You can feel the atmosphere in the house just goes woof, it just changes, it lightens, and it's instantaneous when these things actually do go.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. You know, I've done this now twice to drive them out of my house in 2014 and 2016, and there is a total different atmosphere, you know, in the house. Now, in my instance, because I'm Catholic and that's what my belief system is, I use the name of Jesus Christ to drive them out. Now, are you of that belief, or do you say we just have the power of will to drive them out?
Well, as it happens, I too am Catholic, and it was, well, maybe it wouldn't surprise you, but it surprised me at first when I found the number of Catholics and lapsed Catholics who actually are into the paranormal or paranormal investigation. Yeah. Perhaps it's a measure of the amount of spirituality that's sort of taught to you when you're growing up. But I must say that I've never used the name of Christ or any of the angels or any of the saints in order to drive these things out, because I don't think it's necessary. But if it helps you to do that, yeah, by all means do it, but I don't think it's necessary. I think the power of will and the power of rejection is enough to send these things out.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing I found too is, you know, you watch movies and everything, and you got to bring a priest in to do it because he has a higher level of morality than you, supposedly. But I found that that's not really true. One, I don't find the priest very interested in this, which amazes me, because, you know, I said to my son, what's job one for a priest? It should be to combat evil, combat Satan, and yet I don't know if they don't believe it's real or it's more work and they don't want to get involved, you know?
well, put it this way, back in the 1960s, there was a survey was carried out amongst thousands of Catholic priests throughout the world, and they were asked if they thought Satan was an entity in its own right. And surprisingly enough, quite a few of them said no. They didn't think there was a Satan. They thought that it was a cultural phenomenon. They thought that it was a method of control, and that they did not believe there was a Satan, which seems very strange to me, because if you accept that there's a divine being, a God, then it would seem logical that in order to, if you like, to emphasize the fact that this God is claimed to be merciful, it's claimed to be beneficent, benevolent, then you would have to have an opposite to that in order to reflect this. So in that respect, you would need a Satan. But myself, I've come to the conclusion over the years that God, as some dude with a long white beard sitting on a throne someplace, you know, recording every sparrow that falls, I don't think that exists. But I think there is a form of spirituality. I think there is a form of power, for want of a better word, that binds the universe together. But each and every one of us are an aspect of this power, and there's a spark of it in us, and that when we die, we go back to it again, and we rejoin it. But I think while we're here on Earth, we can manifest aspects of that power if we have confidence enough to do it. And these things that are here with us are forced, almost forced, by this power to obey, and to obey us as human beings. I mean, they might not like it, but I don't think they've got any choice in the matter.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this too. I've read in a number of books, because I did a lot of reading when this started to escalate with me. Do you think these beings, these angels and these fallen angels, are real interdimensional entities, or do you believe it's created in our mind, that our mind has the ability of telekinesis, telepathy? We create and actually take the energy somehow and create the paranormal activity, or did they do it?
Well, I don't think they do it. I think we do it. My own encounters in the past, 10, 20 years or so, I've seen things that moved around. I've actually seen this actually happen. The first time you see it, you can get pretty, wow, what's going on here, guys, but after a while, you tend to be calm about it, because I think in the case of poltergeists, I'm pretty sure poltergeist activity is created by a person. I think that adolescents, as you probably know the story, the adolescents, and especially in young girls, as they're becoming pubescent, they're becoming women, that they seem to release. I mean, it's a very loose term, power or energy, but it's the only thing that seems to fit. Or the other thing is, perhaps there are things out there that can actually use this energy, actually feed on it, if you like, almost like psychic vampires, and project this out. But the thing about poltergeist activity is, it's the sheer pointlessness of it, John. There is absolutely no aim, there's no direction for it. It just happens, and for no good or obvious reason. It's extremely stupid, because if these things are just throwing things around to piss you off, I mean, how stupid can they get? I mean, it ain't going to piss you off, it only annoys you. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that the paranormal activity, normally, I would say, the majority of it is actually generated by an unexpected dimension in the human condition.
Okay. Well, does that necessarily mean that only bad people have these bad experiences, or is it an unconscious thing that you're not controlling it at all? It's your unconscious mind that just kind of like, boom, makes a noise? Or does it mean yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it ain't bad people having bad experiences. These experiences happen whether you're good or bad, makes no difference. It's something that you have very little control over. It just happens. And in fact, the course that I'm rewriting for Steve just now, I'm doing quite a lot of that stuff just now, and I'm encountering, how other people see these things. And it's an educational process for me as well. I don't agree with all of it, but hey, it's not really down to me to say, because each person encounters it and interprets it in their own manner and according to their own cultural beliefs.
Okay. Well, okay, let's get back to Goetia a little bit. And in part of the Goetia is you talk about resonance, tone, frequency, and right away that made me think of Nikola Tesla. What is it about this frequency? Why is that important? So when you say the words in the Goetia, the spell, it has to be said a certain way, and there's power in words that have been said for hundreds of years. Why is all that? Yeah. Why is that important?
It's very important, because one of the things as regarding the power of words, when the Vatican councils were convened back in the 60s, when a lot of the services that used to be said throughout the world in the Catholic faith were said in Latin, it was decided that I think for the sake of communicating with as many people as possible, that the service itself should be said in the language of the country where it was actually being conducted. But one of the things that was never changed within the Catholic doctrine was the Catholic service of exorcism. It was kept in the original Latin, because I believe that this was the case because over the centuries and millennia that these words had accumulated power in themselves and in what they represented and what they were, and because of, as I say, of all the parts of the Catholic communion that were converted into the local language. One of the very, very few parts that wasn't, as I say, was the Ritual Romanum, or the Roman ritual of exorcism. It was kept in Latin.
Yeah, okay. I agree with that. You know, and after meeting with you, I started going to, once a month, I go to a Latin Mass in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. They do the Mass in Latin. And my feeling, my feeling is, you know, if I ever needed to bring the priest in, let's say if this escalates, I even said it to the priest, I gave him a donation, and I said, I may need you to come in, but do it in Latin. And I asked him for a rosary blessed in Latin, and he gave it to me, you know. So, you know, I believe in those power words. If you think about any ritual, witchcraft, any shows, the TV show Supernatural, they have that book, and they say the words, and they have to be said a certain way, and usually it's in Latin or German or some other language, and I think that carries power.
Oh yeah, absolutely it does, because I think a lot depends on the length of time sorry, the form of words has been used, because like I say, I'm pretty sure that over millennia these words will gather power to themselves and become instruments in their own right, and become weapons, if you like, in the fight against evil, which is why that was never changed. In point of fact, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He used to be the chief exorcist at the Vatican.
Amaroth?
Sorry?
Amaroth? Gabriel Amaroth?
No, it'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. That doesn't really matter.
Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin.
No, it wasn't Malachi Martin. No.
Okay, all right.
Malachi Martin was a former, as you probably know, was a former Jesuit.
Right.
Who turned against the Jesuit faith. No, the guy I'm talking about, Gabriel Amort was his name. Gabriel Amort.
Yeah, that's what I said first. Okay, good.
He was the former chief exorcist of the Vatican, and he insisted on using the Ritual Romanum. In fact, he took a pretty dim view of the various Vatican, the Vatican I, Vatican II, when they changed the form of the way that the Catholic Church operated, because he was an extremely conservative man in his outlook. But he certainly, in fact, this same guy, Gabriele Amorto, he said that the film The Exorcist, you know, William Peter Blatty's book that was turned into a film, an excellent film, by the way, was it should actually be shown to any priest that wished to become an exorcist, because he thought that this film actually showed it like it was. And also there's a TV show, I think the Fox Network's doing it, I've seen it across here, I've seen most of the episodes across here, called The Exorcist, and it's based pretty closely on the original film. Obviously a lot of it's moved on since the film was made, but it's still to do with the family that was actually involved, being the little girl that was being exorcised. But if you ever get a chance to watch it, do so, because it's a damn good series. Yeah,
I do watch it. The Exorcist and Vikings are my two favorite shows on television.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But hey, let's move into something else here. You make a comment, and you know, Fred and I have talked in the past about the higher number of ufologists that have died, you know, by you know, suicides, fast-acting cancers, or been knocked off by the CIA or some agency. But you make the comment in here, and I believe this is true also, that Goetic lore of magicians, many of them have gone mad or died as the result of dealing with the entities and forces that were too powerful for them. And and many of Crowley's disciples have either gone insane or become alcoholics. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. You want me to talk a little about Aleister Crowley?
No. Talk about why people go insane.
Okay. Well, the thing I think the reason I've managed to keep most of my marbles, I guess, when dealing with this subject is because I've tried not to specifically concentrate on any one aspect of it and get too deeply into it. Now, the people who are pretty much, and you can almost say they've devoted their lives to actually investigating and carrying out these rituals, are going into places, John, that you and I just don't want to go into, that no one in their right mind would want to go into. So consequently, they're dealing with forces and things that are entirely negative, and they will leech every single bit of life out of the person, and they'll leave them pretty little much else than a husk, pardon me, a husk of humanity. So I think they run out of hope, they run out of faith, and they've got nothing left inside. They've got no inner resources left, because they've all either been sucked out of them by these entities that they've been encountering, just for the sheer negativity of them. I think this is what ultimately leaves them no choice, that they just feel they've got nothing left other than to kill themselves, or to try and drown their sorrows with alcohol or drugs or whatever. And I think that they've just gone into the subject too deeply, and because this is why I say you gaze into the abyss, and the abyss gazes into you. This is a prime example of it, that these people have gazed too deeply and too long into the abyss, and that it's literally sucked them in.
You know, Brian, I agree with you. C.S. Lewis made a comment that it's okay to be curious, but not to get too much into this stuff. And so I look at some of these people that committed suicide, like Morris Jessup and a few others, and I say, could it be that it was just too much for their mind to handle? Because this plays with your sense of reality. When I had things in my house happening, pictures moving, bangs in the wall, constant tapping, you start to question your sense of reality. And if you're not a very strong-minded person like I am, I could see a weak person just collapsing and saying, I can't deal with this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to recount one of the things I think we talked about when we met up in Edinburgh. And this happened to me maybe 3-4 years ago. I just finished writing one of my books, whose name has completely gone out of my head straight. It's just gone out of my head, doesn't really matter. But part of the book, I had to study the Black Mass in some depth. And I'd spent about 2 weeks researching this particular chapter. And I was sitting in this room, in point of fact, and I was sitting on the computer, and I thought, thank goodness for that, that's it, finished. And I just hit the button, full stop, that's the chapter finished. Beg your pardon. And when I did so, as soon as I hit the button to say, right, that's it, finished, I went, in a microsecond, I went cold, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. I went stone cold. And I went, oh no, don't tell me it's happened again. And I realised something had got drawn in. Well, I ignored it. I tried to put it out of my mind, and I gradually warmed up again, and things were fine. Well, that night my wife and I went to bed, and we both woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we both woke. I mean, we both both instantly awake. I mean, she knew I was awake, I knew she was awake, and we could hear these noises in the bedroom. Something scratching on the walls. There was scratching overhead in the upstairs bedroom. There was things getting bumped around. Furniture was getting moved around. We could hear the thumps and bangs. And I was so terrified I couldn't move. You've actually heard the expression, you were frozen with fear. I was frozen with fear. My wife was terrified. I think she knew what had happened, but she didn't say anything at the time. She was even afraid to put the light on in case of what we might see. So we both lay there, holding each other, I guess, for the best part of 3/4 of an hour until past 3 o'clock in the morning. And it all kind of faded away, and then it finally stopped. Well, we fell back asleep again. My wife went to work. I got up, and I waited till she'd gone out. And before I went out, in that period of time, I walked around the house and I blessed the house. And I told whatever it was that had come in to get out, it didn't belong there, it should get out and get out now. And I came back down the stairs again, and I felt the atmosphere in my house lift and I realised I'd done it, I'd got rid of it. So yeah, this can happen, and it's a very real danger, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and I've had the same experiences. You know, it's funny. I think everybody initially they're frightened. They're totally frightened. But you know, in my case, I went from fear to anger, where I actually called them out to show themselves, which is a mistake. You're not supposed to do that. So I mean, because they're more powerful than we are. But you know, for me now, I have no fear of them at all. If it showed itself, I'm going to hit it so hard, I'm sending it back to hell. I swear to God, that's exactly, and I have no fear of them now. I get angry at them now, and they're not going to scare me. So, hey, time is moving fast here. So let me just mention, you mentioned John Alexander here with the Avery and the Avery. Tell us quickly, what is the Avery? What is that?
Well, the Avery, people, well, you know about John Alexander. I know about John Alexander. I had reason to communicate with him a few years ago about something called the Hutchison effect, because Alexander was involved in investigating that. Yeah. Well, the Avery, it was a group of people who took the name of birds. You know, I can't remember, different types of birds. Yeah. And they sort of got themselves together in order to form I felt like a sort of a group of to investigate claims, to act as it was almost like an MJ12, if you like, of sorts. It was a group of people that thought that they could get together to form a consultative group to cover some of the areas that were getting investigated at the time, mainly ufological, I have to say, because some of the areas that Alexander was involved in were pretty off the wall. I mean, Alexander himself is a very, very able man. There's no two ways about it, and I'd never decry him for this. The guy really knew what he was about. But unfortunately, John Alexander couldn't lie straight in bed, because the guy was US intelligence, and there's no one, and I mean no one, in the intelligence community will ever tell the truth about anything. Right. I'm just going to move off slightly a little bit, but it's still related. I mean, there was an example of a book called The Day After Roswell, written by Philip Corso. He was a former colonel in the US Air Force, I believe. Yeah. Now, people took this as an example, that Corso must be telling the truth. Here was the smoking gun that revealed that the US government knew all about ufology and been covering up for years. Well, rather like John Alexander, Corso was an intelligence officer, and it suited him perfectly to spread this misinformation and disinformation about Roswell, about what was back engineered from Roswell, and there was nothing of the kind. All of this stuff that came about, the printed circuits, silicon wafers, lasers, you name it, the stealth technology, this all came from the Project Paperclip, the Operation Paperclip, at the end of the Second World War. Now, what people tend to forget is that Corso was involved in Operation Paperclip. He knew exactly what was getting brought into the USA. He was just as complicit in forgiving Nazis for what they were done to people, in order that the USA could get the technology first before the Russians got it. I can understand why they did it, don't get me wrong. I've no doubt the UK would have done it as well, because one of the people that was brought into the USA was Werner von Braun, who went on to help found NASA. There was also a guy, Dornberger, who became one of the CEOs of the Bell Aircraft Corporation, and a guy called Arthur Rudolph, who was also involved with the Saturn V program. All of these guys were Nazis, first and foremost. In fact, von Braun is on the record as having said, the British couldn't afford us, the Russians terrified us, so we went to the Americans. And basically, everything these guys had done was brushed under the carpet. They were welcomed on board, they were brought into the USA and pardoned for their war crimes, just so that they could get their hands on the technology. Because trust me, stealth technology, lasers, printed circuits, integrated circuits, fiber optics, all came directly from work that was getting carried out in Nazi Germany in the late 1940s, and it all came from there. It had nothing to do with Roswell.
Yeah. You know, I've read also with Alexander. He was a colonel also in the Air Force,
Yeah.
but involved in the intelligence. He was involved in MK Ultra with the mind control, and he's made a number of comments that if you can destroy a person but get the goal of what you're trying to do, that is okay. You know, and the other thing is his wife is very into the paranormal, right? Isn't his wife almost like a high priestess or something? She is an absolute paranormal expert.
Well, don't forget that there are some aspects of the well, if you want, he was involved in Stargate, was another of the projects he was involved in. Now, the Stargate project, as you probably know, ran for about 20 years, and it was officially, and I say officially, wound up because they couldn't rely on the results. I mean, they couldn't guarantee they were going to get results every single time. But for what I can make out, guys like Ingo Swann, some of the stuff he was getting, some of the results he was producing for Stargate were absolutely incredible. That these guys remote viewing, not on here on the Earth, they had them remote viewing in time, they had them remote viewing in space, and allegedly they had tried to get them remote viewing onto UFOs to try and contact the entities that were actually involved with piloting these vehicles. But like I say, I think it lasted for about 20 years or thereabout. Then officially they withdrew the funding and shut the whole thing down. I mean, I think it was all really based around at Fort Meade in Maryland, I believe. But as far as I can tell, as far as I can make out, I think the thing just all went into the black, and it is probably still being continued under another title.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's talk about the skull experiment now. You know, it's funny how most of the stuff you've mentioned, Americans don't know about any of this. The Hutchinson effect, which is the the ability to use like EMP to change your brain waves and create hallucinations.
No. The Hutchinson effect. Now, John Hutchinson is a Canadian, and he came up with a peculiar effect that was based on a condition called electrical hypersensitivity. Now, Hutchinson found in his laboratory that things were levitating, things were moving around, spontaneous fires would break out, and it all seemed to be happening when he was there. It didn't happen when he wasn't there. And all his equipment had to be switched on, and he seemed to interact with us. Now, quite naturally, the intelligence services and the military in Canada and in the USA were very interested in this, because if they could militarize it and weaponize it, it was in their interest to do so. And I guess they tried to do that, and John Alexander was at the back of that. But again, there was I was in contact with the U.S. intelligence department, Army intelligence at Fort Meade. I was also in contact with Los Alamos National Labs to try and get information about this. And this led, and this was before I was actually using the internet, so it took over 20 years ago. And I was sending letters back and forth, one thing and another. And eventually, they actually told me that Fort Meade had lost the information, they had lost the documentation. And I then got in contact with Los Alamos National Labs, because some of their people had looked into this as well. And they also said, nothing to do with us. We know about it, but you'll need to go back to the US Army Intelligence Department at Fort Meade. I got back to them again, and they said, we've told you we've lost the information. So that was it. I mean, you can't argue with that. But I do know, and I guarantee you, this happened 20 years ago, that a tap was put in my phone, and it lasted for about 6 months while I was actually in contact with Fort Meade. So these people do want to know they want to know what you know, and they want to know the kind of questions you're asking and who you're asking it of. So yes, my phone was tapped by the intelligence services, whether they were in this country or the USA, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Tapped with my phone.
Well, let's talk about Skull a little bit. Skull is a town in England, right? Skull.
Yeah.
And this was a 5-year study from 1993 to 1998 to contact the afterlife. So tell us what happened with this 5-year experiment.
Okay. Well, the school experiment, it was a little town called Dis, which is in Norfolk, and not Norfolk, Virginia, but Norfolk in the southeast of England. And this guy called Robin Foy, he set up this experiment in a room in his house that was designated specially for this purpose. And he got a hold of some good mediums, and he got a hold of some people he could trust, and they carried out a series of seances, quite powerful seances I might add, to try and establish concrete evidence that there was an afterlife and we could contact it. Now, in the course of this, they carried out several experiments. Now, the experiments were overseen by people like the SPI, the Society for Psychical Research. There were also involved guys like Bob, he's now dead, the guy Bob Morris, who ran the Arthur Kessler unit at Edinburgh University, which is their parapsychology unit. They went down, and I also know a guy who was there, a guy called Nick, his name will come back in a second. Nick is a friend of mine, him and his wife have been at my house. He actually visited school as well, and he sat in on this. Nick Kyle. He sat in and actually witnessed this actually happening, the stuff that was moving around, being touched. There was also images obtained on rolls of film. Now, some of these images were absolutely fascinating because there was a character, and it's quite a clearly defined image of a character called Blue. Now, the reason they called this entity Blue was because there was all colour film stock that were used. This is before digital photography. The colour stock that we're using produced images of this entity, and it was like a blue wash that was over it, which is why they call this entity Blue. John, I swear to God, this blue was identical to a grey. Now, according to the spirit team that was helping the people in school, these entities live in dimensions that are parallel to ours. Okay, there's 6 or 7 of them, maybe more. But there were 7 that they could actually identify, and that these grey aliens, what we would call a grey alien, were actually other multi-dimensional entities that existed in parallel to us. Sometimes they could contact us, sometimes we could contact them. But the thing is that there were also entities out there that were absolutely inimical to the human race. They hated us with a passion, an absolute passion. And as far as they were concerned, if they could get at us and do us harm, they would. And the other entities tried to keep them to stop them doing this, but sometimes they can't do it. And I think that these are what we now call demons, or demonic beings that actually contact us. They've always been there, and they've always been able to get through occasionally to get to us. But I think that as you were talking about multi-dimensional realities, I'm pretty sure that the paranormal, and ufology for that matter, involves multiple dimensions. And the contact we have with what we are saying are aliens or ETs are in fact contact with these multi-dimensional entities, and the craft that travel in are actually dimensional craft rather than interstellar craft, and they actually can breach these dimensions and sometimes visit us. And there's also another theory that I developed regarding some of the reports I've heard about these entities, that these entities are not discrete, they're not separate to the craft, they're actually part of the craft. They're actually part of the fabric of the craft that it can send out into the outer world to interact with us. Now, I don't know how that sits with you, but I tend to think that this is more of a reality than they are, in fact, spacecraft that are travelling for Zeta Reticuli or Alpha Centauri or whatever. I think these things are actually multidimensional rather than interplanetary.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, the very fact that they're trying to contact the afterlife and they get a gray. I mean, what does that say about the alien abduction, the gray? It's an interdimensional being, and especially the modern day, a lot of the alien abductions take place, around 2, 3 in the morning. The gray comes out of the corner of your room. I mean, this is not your typical alien abduction like back in the 70s, where you saw a craft, you saw somebody in a uniform, and they physically tried to grab you. These abductions take place in altered states, which is another dimension.
Of course, it's the altered states of consciousness, absolutely right. But we also had this conversation in Edinburgh that the reason that the nature of the UFO encounters has changed since I guess since the 50s up to the 1980s, is because the craft that were being developed, mainly in the USA, I have to say, like I guess the stealth fighter, SR-71, stuff like that. And also the drones that are now flying around, the UCAVs, the UAVs and the UCAVs that are flying around now. I'm pretty sure that the sightings that were seen over the lake of, well, the Area 51, Groom Lake, all around there, the strange vehicles, the strange aerial vehicles that were seen, jinking around the sky in strange manners, that a human being could not stand, the G-forces generated, simply because there was no human beings in them, no aliens for that matter. I think what was being flown over Area 51 were the drones that now we see in the sky, flying missions all over the world, and flown by guys sitting in a I guess a porta-cabin someplace, sitting in a remote part of an airfield. They're actually flying these things. So I'm pretty sure that the reason that we don't see UFOs in the same manner anymore is because the programs that were existing then to develop the experimental aircraft have come to fruition, and the aircraft were actually either scrapped or actually brought into flight and are actually flying around now. So I think the nature of ufology has changed markedly in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I even say, I think a lot of what we see now, the black triangles, I even wonder if the whole Hudson Valley back in the 80s with all those black large triangles, and then the Phoenix Lights with the big triangle, I think those were our military. I don't think they were extraterrestrial. I think those were ours, developed from the 40s, from Project Paperclip, like you said.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, all right.
We're
getting a little short on time, believe it or not. Let's talk about the Roslyn Cipher, which takes us back.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I was meeting with you, and remember I told you I was going to Roslyn Chapel the following day, and you told me about this Devil's Cord. I didn't know anything about this stuff. So tell us about the Devil's Cord, and what is that in the Roslyn Chapel?
Well, how long have you got, John?
you got to do it in about 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, Roslyn is a secret. The whole building is a secret. But the greatest secret of all exists in the east of the building and up in the ceiling, where there are about 300, it's just under 400 cubes of stone, each with an engraving on it. And these engravings are patterns that repeat. Now, what these engravings represent are sounds that were recreated by the guy that built the chapel. That I've had actually film crews in my house trying to do it in my house so they could film this what actually happened. I believe originally that certain notes were found to be, if you like, rather special. The augmented fourth is one in particular because the Catholic Church banned the augmented fourth in church music throughout Europe in medieval times, although it was obviously it all came back, because I believe that the augmented fourth played in church settings because most of them were made to a specific set of sizes, could induce altered states of consciousness and members of the congregation, and they could in effect see God, because they were in an altered state. Now the church wouldn't have this, wouldn't tolerate this, simply because it was the arbiter of who would or who would not encounter God, and anyone doing it without their say-so, that this was a big no-no, this was a problem for them. Now, I also believe that this particular note or sequence of notes was encoded into the architecture of the cubes in Roslyn Chapel. Now, I guess I did this, it was in 2002, I think I did this. We got permission to recreate these frequencies, these Roslyn frequencies, in the chapel itself. So I went along with myself, my wife, another investigator, a couple of mediums, and an acoustic therapist as well, and another investigator. And we went along, we took a laptop, we took a set of speakers, and we recreated these tones in the chapel itself. And it was what happened was quite incredible, because while we were upstairs recreating these notes coming off the laptop, because I downloaded a frequency generator and actually recreated specific tones. Now, while we were doing this, a guy went downstairs, one of the guys, the acoustic therapist went downstairs, and he started toning himself. So with a tone upstairs coming from the laptop, with a tone from downstairs coming from the guy, from the acoustic therapist. And while this was going on, we could actually hear both the tones. Then a third tone kicked off. Now the third tone wasn't coming from me, it wasn't coming from him, it was coming from the chapel itself. And then slightly fainter, a few seconds later, another tone kicked off. So the chapel was actually creating two sympathetic frequencies based on the tones that we were creating. Now the guy downstairs didn't know anything about this, he couldn't hear it, but we could. So he stopped toning, and all we were left was the tone being generated by the laptop. And as soon as that happened, the other two tones stopped, click, click, just like turning off a switch. So the chapel, I believe, was designed to incorporate this particular frequency, and the frequencies are actually in the stonework itself, recreated by the patterns in the stone. Because what happened was, I believe, that, because don't forget, the technology to produce this kind of these patterns existed back when it was built back in the 1400s. I think they took a very thin piece of hardened copper, suspended it by one corner rigidly, sprinkled fine sand in it, then stroked it with a bow to create a particular note. And as the particular note would take place, it's called cymatics now, I believe, or Chladni patterns at the time. I believe what happened was that the sand, the very fine sand, would take up a shape depending on the note that was being played. And a careful note was taken of this, and it was reproduced in stone. The actual pattern was reproduced in stone.
Okay. All right. Hey, Brian, we're just about out of time right now. So, yeah, you know what's interesting, though, is that Dan Brown never mentioned anything about the Devil's Cord, you know, with Rosslyn Chapel. He didn't say anything about Goetia. See, I think he missed a big part of that whole Da Vinci Code as far as, the Ark of the Covenant and that. If you follow that whole logic, and maybe that's the February article you're going to print in Phenomena Magazine that I wrote for you. I mean, he left out the whole part about King Solomon and Goetia, the building of King Solomon's temple through Goetia, and this resonance and frequency, and it's in the Rosslyn Chapel with the Devil's Cord. See, I think one of the items in the Ark of the Covenant is this spell, the Goetia, of how to build these structures. And we're not dealing with ancient alien theory, we're dealing with ancient deity theory. They built Baalbek, they built the pyramids, they built King Solomon's temple. We're out of time. Thank you, and I'll see you in Scotland soon. Thank you.
God bless, John. You take care, man.
All right, thank you. Bye.